I tried to help my sister find her real father. What we found was unbelievable. I never thought I would find myself in this situation. My sister Emma came to me one day, asking for my help in tracking down our biological father. She'd always been curious, but I could never understand why it suddenly became so urgent for her. I never thought it would turn into something that would change our entire lives. What we uncovered was so unbelievable. It left us both questioning everything we thought we knew about ourselves, our family, and even our own identities. It started like any other normal day. I was lounging on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when Emma barged into the living room with that same excited energy she always had when something was on her mind. "Hey, I need your help," she said, her face lit up with an almost nervous energy. "I need you to help me find Dad." I blinked, unsure if I had heard her right. She was 24 and had never seemed particularly interested in finding our biological father. We'd grown up with a single mother who never spoke much about him. She had always told us he wasn't a part of our lives anymore, and that was that. "Wait, you want to find him?" I asked, trying to process what she was saying. "After all these years?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, it's been on my mind a lot lately. I know we don't know much about him, but I feel like I need to know. You never know what kind of things you can uncover." I wasn't sure why this was hitting her so hard now, but I agreed to help. What else could I do? She was my sister, and if this meant something to her, I was in. It was a strange feeling to suddenly be on this mission. We didn't have much to go on. All we had was a name, a vague description from our mom, and some old faded photographs of a man we barely remembered. Our mother never spoke about him, and every time we asked, her face would cloud over with discomfort. Something about him was a taboo subject. "Do you think she knows where he is?" I asked Emma, hesitant. I knew our mom wasn't the most open person, but I didn't want to jump into something that could end up being uncomfortable for everyone involved. "She won't talk about it, but maybe that's why we need to do it ourselves," Emma said, determined. "We're adults now. We can handle the truth, whatever it is." And so it began. The search. We started with the basics. I dug through old photo albums and documents we had from when we were younger, trying to piece together any clue about our father. I remembered a few things from the rare moments our mom would talk about him. He had left when I was very young, and Emma was even younger. She barely had any memories of him, while I only had fleeting ones that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I also tried searching through some old family contacts. My mom had a handful of friends who might have known something about him, but every attempt to ask led to dead ends or awkward silences. They were either too busy, too uncomfortable, or outright refused to discuss him. A week passed, and we were no closer to finding anything concrete. It was becoming frustrating. We were both starting to feel the weight of the task and the emotional strain it was putting on us. I could tell Emma was getting more obsessed with the search. She had her mind set on finding this man, but I wasn't sure if it was because she truly wanted answers, or if she was just grasping at the hope of finally filling the void of not knowing who he was. One night, she sat me down in the living room. "I think I found something," she said, her voice shaky but determined. She had been digging into some old social media platforms, and she thought she'd found someone who could be our father, a man who had lived in the same area during the time our mom was pregnant with us. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a profile on Facebook. The man had similar features to us: dark hair, a slight build. His name was James Carson. "This could be him," she said, almost whispering. "But what if it's a dead end?" I asked, unsure about diving into this without more information. Emma's eyes were wide with hope. "It's all I've got, and I need to know, even if it's just the truth about who he is. You understand, right?" I nodded slowly, feeling the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about curiosity anymore. Emma's desire for closure was real, and I couldn't stand in her way. We didn't waste any time after finding James Carson's profile. Emma sent him a message, something simple but direct, just asking if he was the man who had been in a relationship with our mom years ago. It felt surreal, like we were playing a role in some movie, except this was our real life. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to open a door that might change everything, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. The reply came sooner than I expected. "I don't know who you are, but I've got nothing to say about that part of my life. I left all that behind years ago," the message read. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me, but Emma wasn't ready to give up. She pushed harder. Please, just tell us if you were ever with a woman named Rachel. We're just trying to find out the truth about our father. If that's you, we just want to know. To my surprise, he replied again. Rachel? Yeah, I remember her. I was with her briefly, but I didn't stay around. You two wouldn't remember me. The coldness in his words hit hard. It felt like we were just two strangers asking for something he didn't want to give. But Emma wasn't going to back down. She pressed him further, telling him how much it meant for us to know the truth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he agreed to meet up. Fine, I'll meet you, the message said. But I don't want any drama. We'll meet at the park by the river tomorrow at 2 p.m. Don't bring anyone else. It was an odd request, but we agreed. This was it. The moment we'd been hoping for. The chance to finally meet the man who could be our father. I tried to stay calm, but my mind raced. What would we say to him? What if he denied everything? What if he wasn't who we thought he was? That night, I barely slept. My thoughts were all over the place, and Emma was too excited to even rest. We both had so many questions, but all we could do was show up and hope for answers. Make sure to like the video and subscribe so you never miss more shocking and real stories like this one. The next day, we made our way to the park. It was a quiet, sunny afternoon, the kind of day that felt deceptively normal. As we walked along the riverbank, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread gnawing at me. What if this man wasn't who he said he was? What if we'd just been chasing ghosts for the past few days? Emma was unusually quiet beside me. I could see the tension in her body, the same anxiety I felt. We both knew this meeting had the potential to change everything, and yet we had no idea what kind of change that would be. When we reached the park, I spotted a man sitting on one of the benches by the water. He looked older than I expected, his face worn but not unpleasant. He wasn't exactly what I had imagined, but then again, how could I have? I didn't even know what I was looking for. Emma nudged me and we both walked toward him, our hearts pounding in our chests. He looked up when we approached, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. You two are Rachel's kids? He asked, his voice gruff. Emma and I exchanged a quick glance. Yes, she said, her voice trembling slightly. We're her daughters. You were with her, right? He sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. I don't know if I'd call it being with her. It was a fling. I didn't stick around. I don't even know if I'm your father, but I'm the only guy she was with around that time. His words were blunt, and the reality of the situation hit me all at once. Here was the man who could be our father, and yet it felt like he didn't even care. No excitement, no apology, just a man who seemed indifferent to our existence. Emma, however, wasn't backing down. We need to know the truth. Did you leave because of us? Her voice cracked slightly, but she stood her ground. He looked at the ground for a moment, as if weighing his next words. I left because I wasn't ready to be a father, and I didn't want to get stuck in something I wasn't prepared for. He looked up at us, his eyes tired. You two didn't miss out on much. I could feel my anger rising, but Emma reached out and placed a hand on my arm, silently telling me to stay calm. She took a deep breath before speaking again. So, what happened? If you knew about us, why didn't you come back? Why didn't you even try? He stared at the ground again, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought, maybe you were better off without me. He paused for a moment before adding, Your mom? She didn't want me there either. The truth hit like a punch to the gut. My mother had never told us about him, and to hear that she hadn't wanted him in our lives was a shock. The idea that we could have had a relationship with our biological father, and that he had just given up, was almost too much to bear. The conversation lingered in the air, heavy with unanswered questions. I could see Emma's fists clench by her sides, her face a mixture of frustration and disbelief. So, you just gave up on us? She asked, her voice rising slightly. That's all we are to you? Just a mistake? The man shifted uncomfortably on the bench, avoiding our eyes. I never meant to hurt you two, he muttered, but there was no sincerity in his words. It wasn't the right time for me to be a father. I wasn't ready to change my life for something I didn't even know was mine. The anger in Emma was palpable, and I could feel the same emotion boiling in me, but I wasn't sure how to channel it. We had come here for answers, and all we had gotten was more confusion. We're not asking you to fix everything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We just wanted to know the truth. Whether you were there or not doesn't change who we are, but it changes how we feel about everything, and we deserve that honesty. He shifted uncomfortably again and let out a sigh. "Look, I'm not good at this," he said. "I've never been good at taking responsibility. I don't know what else you want from me." I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but Emma, always the stronger one, wasn't ready to walk away without some kind of resolution. "I don't know if we'll ever get closure from this," she said softly. "But at least we know that you weren't willing to try. And that's all we needed to hear." The man stood up abruptly, as though the conversation had drained him. "I don't have much to give," he said, and I could see the weariness in his eyes. "But if you need anything, I'll be here." Emma shook her head, clearly done with the conversation. "We'll be fine without you." As we turned to walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness in my chest. The man who was supposed to be our father had given us nothing. No apologies, no emotional closure, just more of the same indifference. It stung, and I didn't know how to process it. We walked in silence for a while, the weight of the encounter hanging between us. I could feel Emma's anger still simmering, but she stayed quiet. It was as if the world around us had become a blur, and we were stuck in this painful, suffocating moment. As we made our way back to the car, I couldn't help but replay the whole conversation in my head. It was as if I were stuck on a loop, trying to make sense of the words that had been exchanged. But the more I thought about it, the less it all added up. Was he really just that indifferent? Did he really think that abandoning us was the right choice, no matter what the circumstances were? Emma slammed the car door shut with more force than necessary, and I flinched at the sound. She was seething, her eyes glued to the road, her hands gripping the wheel with so much tension that her knuckles were turning white. "I can't believe him," she muttered under her breath. "All these years, and he couldn't even look us in the eye. He couldn't even give us the smallest bit of remorse." I nodded, my throat tight. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. Anger, sadness, frustration, betrayal, they all swirled together into something I couldn't quite explain. But one thing was clear. I didn't want to feel like this anymore. I didn't want to keep chasing a relationship that never existed. We drove in silence for a while, the steady hum of the tires against the road, the only sound filling the car. It wasn't until we were almost back home that Emma finally broke the silence. "You know," she started, her voice quiet but determined, "I don't think I ever needed him. I thought I did. I thought that if I could just find him, everything would somehow make sense. But now I see that I've been living for years with this hole in my heart that he's not the one who can fill." I glanced over at her, surprised by the words she'd just spoken. Emma had always been the stronger of the two of us, the one who could always find a way to push through the toughest of situations. But hearing her say this, I realized how much this search had affected her, how much we both had been carrying. "I didn't think you'd say that," I admitted softly, my own heart aching. "I always thought you needed the closure, the answers, the relationship." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Yeah, well, turns out the answers were always right in front of us. We've got each other. We don't need him." Her words struck a chord, and a weight lifted off my chest. I had been so focused on trying to get some kind of validation or acceptance from him, thinking that if I just pushed harder, if I just forced the relationship into being, everything would be okay. But she was right. We didn't need him to define who we were. We already had a bond, a connection, that no stranger could replace. "Thanks, Emma," I said quietly, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't realized I needed. "For reminding me." She just nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "That's what family is for." We pulled into the driveway, the night feeling a little quieter, a little less heavy. It wasn't the closure we expected, but maybe it was the closure we needed. And that was enough for now. The following days felt strangely lighter. Emma and I spent more time together, and I found myself leaning on her more than I had in years. We didn't talk much about our dad, but it didn't seem necessary anymore. It was as if acknowledging his absence had somehow allowed us to focus more on the things that truly mattered: our relationship, our future, our ability to move forward. But still, there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I kept wondering if there was something we were missing, something else hidden in the details. Why had our dad left? Why had he never once tried to reach out, even after all these years? Maybe we weren't meant to know. Maybe the search was a futile exercise from the start. I decided to do what I always do when I get stuck in my own thoughts: throw myself into something productive. I focused on work. on things I could control. But it wasn't until the weekend came around that I found myself going through some old boxes in the attic. I had been avoiding the attic for a while. It was full of old things, memories I wasn't sure I was ready to face again. But something about the dusty boxes called out to me, and I started going through them one by one. I found old photos, letters, and some of Emma's childhood drawings, and for a moment, I allowed myself to get lost in the past. But then, at the very bottom of one of the boxes, I found something that sent a chill down my spine. It was a letter from our dad. The paper was yellowed and crinkled at the edges, and the ink had faded, but the words were still clear enough. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, but it was written during the years we had been looking for him. He had been in contact with someone, a person we didn't know. The letter was a confession of sorts, but not about what I had expected. It said, "I know I've hurt you both. I've made choices that will haunt me forever. But I did it to protect you. I couldn't face what I'd done. It's better this way." I didn't even know what to make of it. The words echoed in my mind, and I felt a sense of dread settling in my chest. What did he mean by protect? Was it about his reasons for leaving? Did it have something to do with us? I stood there, frozen for a moment, the letter in my hands. I had finally found some kind of answer, but it was wrapped in more questions than I had anticipated. The letter made it clear that our dad was hiding something much bigger than I had ever realized. And if I had thought the search for him was over, I was wrong. Because now, I was left with more than just the mystery of his disappearance. This wasn't the closure I was expecting. It was the beginning of a whole new chapter, one that might answer questions I wasn't sure I even wanted the answers to. I stood frozen in the attic, the letter clutched in my hands. It was from Dad, and it hinted at something he had been hiding, something about protecting us. But from what? I was overwhelmed by a mix of curiosity and fear. I walked downstairs and found Emma in the living room. Her eyes searched mine when she saw my face. "What happened?" she asked gently. "I found something," I said, sitting next to her and holding up the letter. Emma's eyes widened as she took it from me and read it in silence. "What does it mean?" she finally asked. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaky. "But whatever it is, Dad didn't want us to know. He thought it was better we stayed in the dark." Emma looked at me, her brow furrowed. "So, what do we do now?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out," I said firmly. "We have to. We've come this far." Emma nodded, her determination matching mine. "We'll do it together." I felt a mix of fear and resolve. Whatever Dad was hiding, it was time to uncover the truth. We decided to dig deeper, but Emma and I knew that finding out the truth wasn't going to be easy. The letter led us to a name, a man who, according to the document, had been close to Dad at one point, but it didn't offer any specifics. We spent the next few days searching online, calling anyone who might have known Dad in the past, and trying to piece together anything that might lead us to this mysterious man. One afternoon, after hours of research, I finally found a phone number. It was listed as belonging to a close friend of Dad's from years ago. I wasn't sure whether to feel excited or anxious about calling, but I knew it was the next step. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. The phone rang for what felt like forever before someone picked up. "Hello? Hi, is this Greg?" I asked, trying to sound calm. I'm looking for some information about my father." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Who is this?" the man asked, his voice cautious but curious. "My name is Name, and I'm the daughter of your old friend, Dad's name. Oh, I remember your father," he interrupted, his voice shifting to something that sounded almost nostalgic. "But why are you asking about him? I haven't heard from him in years. Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. I need to know something about him. Something he never told me. Something important. Greg hesitated again. "Look, I don't want to get you mixed up in something that's long been buried. Your father wasn't exactly the man you think he was." My heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by that? "Just tell me what you know," I urged, feeling both desperate and fearful. There was a long silence before Greg finally spoke. "You really want to know?" he asked, his voice lowering. "It's going to change everything you thought you knew about him." Greg's words hung in the air, thick with tension. I was bracing myself for whatever was about to come, but I wasn't prepared for the truth that he dropped on me next. "Your dad," Greg said slowly, wasn't your dad. I froze. I literally froze. I had heard those words, but I couldn't process them. How could that even be possible? The man I called dad for 24 years, who had raised me, loved me, was not my father? Greg went on, his voice now full of regret. There's a lot I could say, but it's not my place. Your real father? Well, he's someone you wouldn't expect, someone from a long time ago, someone your parents have kept hidden from you. I was reeling, every question hitting me like a freight train. I couldn't even form a coherent response. Why didn't they tell me? Why keep it from me? I managed to stammer, my mind racing. I don't know. Your mom made sure it stayed quiet, but now, after all these years, I think you deserve to know the truth. I really do. The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I felt like the world around me was slipping away. Everything I knew was being questioned. Where do I go from here? How do I find him? I asked, barely above a whisper. Greg sighed, a long, heavy breath. You'll have to find him yourself. He's still out there, but trust me, when you do find him, it's going to be complicated. You may wish you hadn't asked. I wanted to believe him, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that I had to know more. I couldn't just leave it like this. My whole life had been built on a lie, and now I was desperate for the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. I wasn't sure if I was thanking him for the information or for shattering my world. As I hung up the phone, the silence in the room felt unbearable. What had just happened? How could this be real? I spent the next few days in a haze. Greg's words were still echoing in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just scratched the surface of something much deeper. My world had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to make sense of it all. Every conversation I had with my parents felt strange, like I was now viewing them through a completely different lens. They had lied to me, not just about my biological father, but about everything surrounding my identity. And the worst part, they had kept the truth from me for so long. I knew I had to take action. I had to find out who my real father was and why they had kept him from me. It wasn't going to be easy, and it was definitely going to be painful. But I couldn't just sit back and accept the lies anymore. A few weeks later, I finally gathered the courage to start searching for him. I had some clues from Greg's vague explanations, but they weren't enough to paint a clear picture. It was a process of digging through old records, talking to distant relatives, and trying to piece together fragments of the past. What I uncovered shocked me. The person I was looking for was not just a stranger. He was someone I had known all my life. He had been right in front of me the whole time, but the truth of how everything had been kept hidden from me for so long was something I wasn't prepared for. The day I found him, I was filled with a strange mix of excitement and fear. This was the moment where everything would change. But what I discovered when I finally spoke to my real father, well, it was more than I could have ever imagined. The conversation was long and emotional. My father had his own reasons for staying away. And when I finally understood them, the anger and pain I had been holding on to began to dissipate. It was a complicated, messy situation, but it was my reality now. The pieces finally clicked into place. I stood there, looking at the man I never knew, and yet, somehow, felt connected to. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew that I could no longer live in the shadow of the lies that had defined me for so long. And that's when it hit me. The truth, no matter how painful, was liberating. It was a hard pill to swallow, but once I swallowed it, I could finally begin to heal. If this story hit you hard or made you question your own reality, I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever discovered something about your family or yourself that completely changed your perspective? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories like this one. Trust me, the truth can be stranger than fiction, and who knows what might be waiting for us around the corner. Thanks for reading.